Tonight's story is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction.
Who's gone off? Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
And this is?
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Houston, we have a problem.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Now, where was I?
Welcome to episode 132 of the BlokeBusters podcast. I'm Paul, and today, once again, we have a fantastic guest. Always great to have him back on. It is Mr. B-Rob. Thanks for coming back on. And this time we're actually going to be talking about a film that you suggested. You reached out and basically was just like, hey, have you ever seen Safe House? And my initial response was, no. And then we decided to talk about Safe House. So I believe that was the extent of it. Is that your recollection?
Well, but you don't remember the original prompt for that. It was, I was having a conversation, or we were having a conversation about how Ryan Reynolds is just Ryan Reynolds in movies.
Yes,
and he doesn't have any serious roles to speak of. And I suggested Safe House. Yes,
I do recall that conversation. I don't recall all of it, but I do recall now that you mention it, that it is interesting about Mr. Ryan Reynolds, especially recently, as I know I've mentioned in episodes past, that he does tend to enjoy just sort of being himself. So, yes, definitely.
And who wouldn't want to be?
Yeah. If you can get away with just being yourself and getting paid handsomely for it, I absolutely can see how he has managed to do that, and jammy git, but lovely man, but a completely jammy git. Okay, so let's get nuts and bolts out of the way real quick. First off, if you want to get a hold of us about anything that is said in this episode, you can go to Twitter at BlokeBusters, Facebook.com/BlokeBusters, Instagram.com/BlokeBusters. You can email theblokes@BlokeBusters.com, or you can go to, either BlokeBusters.com, or you can go to allportsopen.com and check us out there. It is a lovely couple of websites. And then this film, Safe House, directed by Daniel Espinosa, a name that I was not too familiar with, I'll really admit, and so I looked him up, and turns out there's a couple of films that he's done, or is almost finished doing, that I recognize. The first is from 2017. He directed Life. I have not seen it, but I am aware of it and of its supposed connection with Venom.
What?
For people that are completely unaware and don't mind mild spoiler ? Life is sort of seen as potentially a pseudo origin of Venom, but unofficially.
Whoa. You mean Life with Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy, or a different Life?
This is 2017 Life.
Oh, you talking about the... I know what you're talking about now, with Jake Gyllenhaal and all them. All right.
Yep, and Ryan Reynolds. He also is the director of Morbius, which will be coming out soon. The Jared Leto vampire MCU/Sony film that is coming out. So, I definitely had no idea that was him, and now I'm intrigued. More intrigued than I was when I saw the trailer recently. So.
Yeah, I did say the same thing, though, because I didn't see Life all the way through, but I saw bits and pieces of it, and I thought that it had the potential to be the origin of Venom, because, it's a similar thing. Astronauts go to space, they find a symbiote latch on to somebody, they bring it back to Earth, and there it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, basically, it is more so than, obviously you get people online when you talk about these films who start putting out fan theories and all of that. And so, it seemed to fit well with this film, and then people really started looking into it, and like it really does seem like they had it in mind, and especially when you look into, and obviously we're not doing this, there was stock footage from Spider-Man 3 that was in a trailer for it. Then the screenwriters for Life had previously written a Venom script, and the Daniel Espinosa had confirmed he is a fan of Venom, so it's clearly heavily influenced. So it's one of those things where had things gone a different way, then they absolutely could have used it as a Venom origin, but then we obviously got Venom, I believe, a year after that. So, look, so it doesn't actually factor into the current Venom canon, but I can see it being used as much probably down the line, maybe during another reboot or whatever, whenever they get to that.
So how do you think that's going to go?
I don't know.
Well, the word on the street is that Marvel and Sony came with an agreement for another 3 Spider-Man Marvel / films.
They did, yes, which means that supposedly Tom Holland will continue to be Spider-Man. However, there is always the possibility that he will stop, and we are never going to know until it happens, which I kind of appreciate, because I myself am a Doctor Who fan. I'm sure it has come up before on some of these, and when it comes to Doctor Who, there is absolutely no way that they can hide when there is going to be a new Doctor. They've ever since the series got rebooted and restarted with Christopher Eccleston, they announced that he was going to be leaving without telling Christopher Eccleston. They just announced that he was going to be leaving and then made up a reason as to why he was leaving, which turns out was false. So we all knew that when the last episode of that series came on, that he was going to regenerate. And then when David Tennant left, that was a huge thing. And then when Matt Smith left, once again, you think so I'm used to at this point, no matter what, even outside of Doctor Who, pretty much any film, anything where there's been any form of recasting whatsoever, months or sometimes even years ahead. So I kind of like how close Marvel and everyone are holding their card to their chest for these. It'll definitely be interesting. I'm very intrigued to see where that goes.
And specifically, I mean, they don't even have to go the Peter Parker route. They can go Miles Morales.
They can indeed. They can also go, basically pretty much anyone at this point in given that they're going with multiverse, literally any character we've seen so far could turn out to be Spider-Man.
They future-proofed all their franchises. They have time travel. They have multiverse theories and variants and everything. So, I mean, they have future-proofed their franchise. Yeah. Nobody is truly dead, and nobody is truly gone.
Exactly. Although I do think the final shot of any Spider-Man film, being the final Spider-Man film of this current era, shall we say, has to be J. Jonah Jameson as Spider-Man. It's got to be whenever J.K. Simmons decides to retire, they need to just finish whatever Spider-Man film it is and just have him as Spider-Man at the end of it. Okay, getting back to Safe House. So this film had a budget of $85 million and a box office of $208,076,205 US worldwide.
US doll hairs.
Indeed, yes. It's amazing that they were accepting that as tender all the way back in 2012, which, as of when this episode will air, will actually mean that this film is pretty much 10 years old at this point, because this episode will come out at the beginning of next year. We are recording this at the end of 2021 for prosperity there. But yes, it's interesting. I when you asked me if I'd seen this film, I said, no, I don't think I have. And I looked into it and I was like, no, I've not seen that. And then I sat down to watch it and it was just unfolding in front of me. I was like, I think I have seen this. But I couldn't tell if it was one of those things where the film is relatively by the numbers, so you kind of know what's going to happen, you know, like what some of the big scenes are going to be, and you can see some of the things coming, or I had seen it before and had forgotten, and I have that interesting sort of precognition that you get when you watch something that you might have seen before, and you start to remember what happened before it happens. So yeah, it was very interesting, and so I guess I wanted to ask you at this point, do you feel that this film is a very sort of by the numbers thriller in this case? Like, does it follow the stereotypical plot of these films?
Oh yeah. Okay. I mean, in hindsight, watching it again in preparation for tonight, yes, definitely. But way back when I watched it the very first time, I just usually first viewings for me are just turn the brain off and enjoy it for what it is. So the first time I watched it, that's exactly what it was. So going back to watch it again as a review is just like all the people are inept.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, a large number of people are inept. The person that you are fairly certain is going to be the double crosser is the double crosser, and the main characters have some of the best set of plot armor you could find this side of anime. So yeah, no, it's very interesting watching this because, as I said, I genuinely couldn't tell if I had seen it before or if I was just correctly guessing what was going to happen next each time.
Because watching it again, just after seeing it, it's just like, all right, you can see the bad guy and you can see his sussiness.
Yeah.
You know, he's very sus. And it's just like certain things that were said and just, facial expressions and things as well like that. It really is a tale in this film. But like for the first time, like fresh, never not knowing anything about it, somebody just watching it, they probably wouldn't have picked up on it right away.
Yeah, and it is interesting because there were a couple of times where Brendan Gleeson's character does a thing where they've just made a call or they've just figured something out in the war room, basically, as they're and then he either comes back into the room with his phone in his hand or he leaves and then it cuts away. I was kind of hoping that it would turn out to be Linklater that was the actual villain, and that Brendan Gleeson's character would then be working to catch her and be on Ryan Reynolds' side. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did plant the if you happen to know this style of film, they did plant the seeds as they went, and it did turn out to be exactly what you thought. So, but yeah, and I will say, it does sound like I'm bagging on this film a little bit. And if you went into this expecting it to be completely unique, then yeah, no, you're going to be disappointed. But I will say right now, I did not dislike this film at all. I did enjoy it, and I'm interested to get your take on it because obviously we had Ryan Reynolds in a fairly serious role, and he doesn't have a huge amount of the wisecracking ness that we know from Ryan Reynolds now. There was some. Definitely there was some in there, especially
very
at the beginning.
toned down.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like he was clearly doing the PG-13 version of what he can do for this film, even though this film, I don't believe was PG-13. I actually have no idea.
Too much shooty bang bang for it to be PG-13.
Yeah, Um,
I'm gonna double check.
yeah, I'd say I would imagine it was probably what is it, R? I think yeah, because it's PG-13 and then it goes straight to R in America, doesn't it? So
Indeed.
yeah, which is so weird.
Yes, it is rated R.
Okay, yeah. And it, there was some swearing and stuff, so I didn't assume it was going to be PG-13, but yeah, it was interesting to see him genuinely taking this role seriously and trying to go through that, and I think his character was written the way that I would expect a serious Ryan Reynolds character to be written, because he is sort of, he's not the newbie, because he's obviously been working in this job for a while, but he is completely new to the situation he's in. Yeah. So, it wasn't a surprise to me that was kind of how his character was. But I will say I did enjoy Denzel Washington as Frost. I thought he was far and away the best thing in this film.
Oh, yes, of course.
And for me, I was getting flashes of Tom Cruise from Collateral.
I haven't seen that in a long, long time.
Yeah, no, I need to go back and rewatch that. But just his character and his demeanor, like I was sort of getting flashes of that as it was going on, and I very much enjoying it. I also don't remember. I think Collateral came out before this film, but I do not recall, and I have not looked it up. So there we go. But yeah, it was a good pairing. I will say the
Collateral came out in 2004.
So absolutely, 8 years before this one. Yeah, that's it. I would say it was one of those things where you hear like, oh, it's Ryan Reynolds and Denzel Washington doing a sort of spy action thriller. Like,
yeah. And then I can't recall even Denzel. I could be completely wrong, except for it was a real old movie, and I think it's the very first movie that I saw Denzel in, and it was called Heart to Heart or something like that. It had the guy who played the detective in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Had Bob Hoskins in it?
Yeah, Bob Hoskins, yes. So Bob Hoskins was a racist cop, and he had a heart attack, and Denzel, he died. He was an organ donor, and he gets his heart. So once he do the transplant, he starts seeing Denzel as like a ghost and shit. You following him around and shit, and make him change his ways and turn over a new leaf.
Okay. Heart Condition.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes. A 1990 buddy fantasy comedy film.
Yeah, so that's the only film that I can recall of Denzel Washington doing comedy. Not only to be second to Two Guns with Mark Wahlberg.
Okay.
So these are the only two comedy films that I can recall Denzel Washington being in.
Yeah, he generally is the serious one. I know I've seen him in the Manchurian Candidate remake, Training Day. I know he was in The Bone Collector. I unfortunately have not seen that one, but I've heard he was very good.
Oh, they made a TV show after that movie.
They did? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look for
the
that.
guy that's from what's that? Lincoln Heights, the cop. Dad. He's like everybody's dad in every sitcom and shit. He wound up playing Denzel's character.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll have to look that up. That could be interesting.
But the character Denzel plays in here, Tobin Frost or whatever his name is.
That is it exactly.
So it feels like to me is a evolution of Denzel's badassery characters leading up to Training Day in 2012.
Yeah. It is definitely something where I can see him pulling from all of these things that he's done, and I think for this film, I genuinely can't think of anyone else that would have done this role better. And obviously, it's easy to say that because this is what we got. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, so I would find it difficult to imagine someone else in that particular role. But I genuinely can't think of anyone who would have taken this script and this setup and done a better job at delivering what we got.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely enjoyed it.
So basically, you taking 2007's American Gangster, his portrayal of Frank Lucas, then you're gonna sprinkle it with some of this Tobin Frost character, and then it will give you 2012 Denzel in Training Day.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little touch of his character from 2000. No, that's after the fact. Never mind. I can't even correlate that because it came after Training Day. But yeah, all those three that I mentioned, two I mentioned prior to sprinkles, and it makes the character we got in Training Day.
I will say Training Day from 2001. So
What, it's 2001?
2001. Yep.
What? Hold on. I'm looking at the wrong dates on all this crap.
But no, I will say one thing I found very interesting. I was going back.
So, yeah, in reverse. So Training Day, Frank Lucas to this movie. There
Yes, there you go.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. I was trying to think back, like looking at Denzel's filmography and checking in on some of those things.
A lot of action.
A lot. And I think the film I saw him in before this one was actually Book of Eli. So very interesting.
That's your first viewing of him?
That wasn't my first ever viewing of him. As I said, I had seen Training Day and Manchurian Candidate, and some of those. So I had seen him in things before, but the most recent film that I recall that I had seen him in was Book of Eli, and then this one. So yeah, very different role.
Oh yeah. You should look at a film from 2006, 2006, called Deja Vu. I mean, this just quickly turned it into a Denzel podcast, but yeah, dude made some good movies. Even though me and him got beef, because when my wife was on my anniversary show for the podcast, we do for every year for my birthday. She comes on the show and she answers questions from the audience. So one of the questions was like the indecent proposal joint, but they dumbed it down. They made it like a kiss. They're like, if a celebrity came up to you, offer you some money for a kiss, blah, 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 and she picked Denzel. So me and Denzel always have beef.
I see. Yeah, I mean,
doesn't make him a bad actor, though.
No. Does not make him a bad actor, and I would say I would accept money. Absolutely. But yeah, no. One thing I was actually going to say, and I didn't even realize this at the time, when I was talking about how this film has the pairing of Ryan Reynolds with Denzel Washington in this sort of film, and it's like, okay, like, interesting. I'm not quite sure how that would work, and they pulled it off. I was going to say that it would be the same sort of a pairing as a film that I did not watch because I thought it sounded really stupid, and it's Unstoppable.
Oh, yeah,
and I have just realized that Denzel Washington was in that one too. So, yeah, cause I remember hearing about it and being like, okay, so you got two good actors in this film. Like, it's a very interesting idea. And then, as it turns out, I believe it was fairly well reviewed and did well, but it never piqued my interest. I'll be perfectly frank. But
Frank, how do you feel about all this?
I'll say I think what I want to do with this, rather than kind of delve into the plot, because as we have at this point well established, the plot is exactly the same as every other version of this film you're likely to find. A lot of double crossing and things like that. I think what I want to do is actually ask you, outside of Denzel Washington and Ryan Reynolds, who is your favorite character in this film? Was there anyone else that sort of jumped out at you as they were really good in this role?
probably the lead henchman because he didn't say shit, but he got stuff done.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I did find it interesting. It didn't click in my head until I was looking it up later, but the person who played Daniel Kiefer is the T-1000. What? Yeah, it's Robert Patrick himself.
Yeah. No shit. In the beginning, for the crew that brought in Tobin Frost. Yeah.
Because and it was like, I just, for whatever reason, it just didn't click in my head.
Yeah, and I'm bad with names, so I mean, I know the faces. As soon as you said Terminator, I was like, oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. But the thing that actually jumped out to me, and not necessarily because of the way it was portrayed, although I did think it was a really good short role, but Joel Kinnaman as Killer in the film. I am a massive fan of Altered Carbon.
That was a good show.
Yeah. And so at this point, seeing him in anything, I really enjoy it. So in case you are having trouble placing him, he is the housekeeper at the new safe house towards the end. And yeah, I thought he did really well there. And I always will give props to Brendan Gleeson because I thoroughly enjoy his work. The issue that I had with him, and also to some extent Vera Farmiga as well, like those two in this film, it felt very much like we're here, we're doing the dialogue, and we'll see how this goes. Like I didn't feel like they were embodying their characters in this particular instance. I don't know about you. What did you think?
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's just if this movie wasn't moving forward with the action, it was just like the dialogue was like blah.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, all right, set up this so we can get to the next action scene.
Pretty much, yeah. It is interesting that like again for with Ryan Reynolds, an actor who we know now can really perform when it comes to things like dialogue and stuff like that, and especially improvisation. He's in a film where the script is meh, and yet it's still really holding attention and doing very well at it. And so it's clear that he, when given a chance, can run with it. And it's yet again an example of someone who can do amazing comedy, also killing it when it comes to doing the serious roles. And it is always fascinating to me that you more often see people who do comedy then being fantastic in serious roles, especially like, say, Robin Williams. Absolutely phenomenal in some of his really serious roles, like 1 Hour Photo.
1 Hour Photo, yeah. That's the one that always sticks out to me.
Yeah, and I mean, just insanely good as that. Steve Carell as well. He does some phenomenal
like
straight
Fox
stuff.
Chaser or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's
Foxcatcher. There you go. One of them.
And also, he is the uncle in Little Miss Sunshine. And he is pretty much completely straight in that and does brilliantly. And then there was one other I was going to do.
This shit, Jason Bateman.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the whole series Ozark or whatever. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting to me just to watch that stuff happen. And then there's much less of much less instances of someone who is typically really straight then doing comedy. In fact, the only one that is jumping out to me is Leslie Nielsen. He started out 100% a straight serious actor, and then he did Airplane.
And never look back.
Yeah. And
I mean, he would be like how we talk about Ryan Reynolds. He would probably be the earliest case of that, right? It's just like actor, and then when he got some leeway to be himself, this is all he did after that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I will say it is fascinating to watch interviews with him and just sort of see it, because that silly side, once he was able to embrace it, like that was genuinely just him. Like he would quite often in interviews sort of pretend that he was feeling unwell and would then like make fart noises all the time, like just having to shift in his seat and just pretending to fart just to see what the interviewer would do. And yeah, like it's so interesting to see stuff like that, and it is fascinating to me just how some of these people can do really well and are ridiculously talented. Yeah, Hugh Laurie being another one that I know I've mentioned before. Just insanely talented, but yeah, I do find it
another example that he can do comedy, but I've only really known him for serious roles is the guy that played the the Mandarin in Iron Man 3.
Oh, Ben Kingsley.
Yeah, not the bald head guy, but the actual reveal of the I was about to say Mandalorian.
That's Pedro Pascal, isn't it? No, Ben Kingsley. It's a very interesting thing. Like, if you actually go through his back catalogue, he does some phenomenal acting roles. Like, I mean, he is Gandhi. As well as a whole bunch of other things, but there are several like little bits here and there where it's clear like he will happily take the silly role, and it can be a joy to see it. Now, despite the amount of love I do have for Ben Kingsley as a person, I will always resent him a little bit for doing the live action Thunderbirds film. Yeah, I don't know. Are you aware of Thunderbirds as a franchise?
That was a cartoon from back in the day, wasn't it?
It was a marionette show.
Oh yeah. I remember that. It was like almost the inspiration for Team America, like.
Pretty much, yeah, like that style of puppetry. Very popular in the '60s. So yeah, it was Jerry Anderson made that whole thing. So he did Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, Joe 90, Fireball XLR, I think is what it was called, and Stingray as well. I watched all of them except for the Fireball one when I was growing up. Just phenomenal shows. Actually, surprisingly, Thunderbirds, the TV show, gave someone who was the daughter of my parents' good friends, gave her a lifelong fear of enclosed spaces. Because there's an episode where people are trapped in a lift that's on fire, and
that's not good.
Yeah, and so she figured it out, maybe 10 years ago, in therapy. Like, she figured out that's where it came from. So yeah, very interesting and a great show. Had fantastic like ongoing story. Like, the setting was very clear, and then they made a live action film, which was a prequel. And so I went with two of my friends who also watched Thunderbirds when they were younger, and it's shit. I mean, the things that they got wrong, I genuinely don't have enough time to go over them. The main issues that I had with it, the main two issues that I had is, number one, they gave the Hood, who is the main bad guy, the main antagonist throughout the series, portrayed by Ben Kingsley. They gave him, for absolutely no reason, the ability to fly. In the show, he had the ability to sort of psychically connect with his half brother, who worked for the Tracy family, and so he would sort of get information from them and occasionally make his half brother do things. That was the only sort of supernatural thing that he had. He was just also someone who had a lot of time, money, and nefarious means to interfere and attempt to bring down international rescue. But no, in this film, he can just fly, because why not, I guess. But then one of my biggest hates towards this film, aside from, you know, the acting and the writing and all of that stuff, basically the film, is that the film is set in like 2015. It came out in early 2000s, I believe it was. So, it was set in the not too distant future of 2015. Oh, what a wondrous time that was going to be. And the series is set in 2065. The film ends with the entire lineup, as we know it from the show, finally being ready and about to go on their first mission. The TV show begins with them going on their first mission. Mm-hmm. So apparently between the film ending and their first ever mission, 50 years goes by. It's something where it's like, if they'd at any point just gone on Wikipedia or like watched the show and just gotten a date, or even talked to the people at the Jerry Anderson estate, they would have known what the date was and just changed the date in the film. That's all they had to do, and it's clear they didn't give a shit. Yeah, like I could you tell I was a big fan of the show when I was growing up?
I couldn't tell, man. I was having a hard time.
Yeah, but so anyone that is listening, please never, ever, ever watch the live-action Thunderbirds film from the early 2000s. It is fucking dreadful. Instead, maybe watch Safe House.
Yes.
It is definitely a better thriller, a better action film than that one is. So,
we went on a tear on that one. Boy.
Oh, we absolutely did. As is the norm, to be fair.
Yeah.
You're on. But yeah, bring it back to this. I do find it interesting. You mentioned earlier that the action scenes are good, and there's a fair number of them, and they do keep the pacing of the film up. Apparently, this film was fairly criticized for the editing of its action scene.
Oh yes, I have one scene in particular in my mind that I've been waiting to talk about.
All right,
so
let's go for it.
All right. So I think it was right after they raided his friend's house, the document forger. And, they was chasing them through, and Ryan Reynolds tackled one of the assailants, or whatever the hell you call them. And he was holding them at gunpoint. He was already wounded because he shot him and everything. And he was pressing them for information. So if you know your weapons well enough and you look at this scene, you see Ryan Reynolds put the gun to the guy's head, and you hear him cock the hammer on the weapon. No problem with that, except it's a Glock. And if you know your weapons, a Glock does not have a hammer on it. It's just a slide. So he put the gun to his head, and it made like he's cocking the hammer sound. And
right.
A Glock can't do that because it has no hammer to cock.
Well, I mean, maybe on the day Ryan Reynolds just made that sound himself, and they ran with it. No, yeah, that I do not know my weapons. I have had no experience myself with those sorts of things. However,
think of a revolver. Everybody knows what a revolver is, right?
Yes, exactly.
If you ever seen one of those in the movie, you know how he put his thumb on the back and he pull it back, and it makes the cocking sound.
You get that lovely click as it goes
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
A Glock does not have that mechanism to do that.
No. Yeah, that is definitely something that I feel like a lot of these films, and especially potentially there was a crunch to get this film out. I don't know. I did not look into that, but yeah, it definitely feels that a lot of time people that are doing the sound editing, they go to the weapon soundboard and pick a sound that they think is most menacing or most gets across what's going on.
Yeah, it makes sense in the moment. It makes sense in the scene, but
yeah,
it's just a small faux pas.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like little things like that. You can you can kind of get away with in this sort of a film because, let's face it, the majority of people that are going to see this film probably are not either paying too much attention to that or do not have as much experience with those sorts of weapons, and it will slide by. Now, potentially, this is something you just picked up on your second viewing. Do you feel like you caught that the first time you watched it?
Oh yeah, I did not. The first couple of times that I watched this, I did not pay attention to it.
Exactly. So I get the feeling that chances are enough people that watched this when they made it either didn't know or didn't care, and then the majority of people didn't really catch it. But as you say, any actual critical look into it from someone that knows their stuff, that doesn't pass muster. And actually, specifically that scene as well, when they are going after Frost and Ryan Reynolds is in the car going after him, I will freely admit, couldn't tell what the hell was going on. Obviously Frost was running, Ryan Reynolds was driving. It felt like they ran over the same house several times. The same portion of that, because it kind of looked like they basically just had him drive down one street, reverse, and then drive down in a slightly more erratic manner, and then just kept doing that every time they cut to him driving, because I didn't feel like he actually was going all the way through this thing. It was very disjointed, and then it was so dark. I was watching this on my TV at night, so I had lights on, but it wasn't as bright as daytime, and so I don't know if my TV wasn't set up right, or if this was just another example of Hollywood being like, oh, it's nighttime, let's kill every light in this scene. I just couldn't tell what the hell was going on half the time. I obviously knew basically what would happen, and I got the idea, and then once he got into the car, oh look, the lights inside the car work now. So we got a better view of what they were doing. But yeah, no, I can see why there were criticisms of this film's editing. But even despite that, I do feel that the majority of the action scenes were well handled. And on top of that, pretty much any scene towards the beginning where Denzel is attempting to get away from the people that are after him, I thought that was a really well done scene.
You could see him assessing the situation every time he got caught, or he was just like, how am I going to get out of this?
Yeah. Yeah, it was really interesting as well, given this day and age, when every film goer is basically spoon-fed every single piece of information they need to know. The fact that we actually have no idea who he is until he gets into the CIA, or not CIA, sorry, until he gets into the embassy, and then the CIA come in and explain to us who he is. It's about 15 minutes from when we first see him to when we actually find out why anyone is after him. I really enjoyed that. I thought that it was a nice change from all of these films where basically it would start with you see surveillance on this guy, and then it's just two people saying, so why are we surveilling this guy? Oh, you don't know? This guy is actually the top of the CIA hit list. It was good. This was probably towards the beginning of the end of when Hollywood realized that the people that go to these sorts of films don't care for letting the film breathe, and just want to see. We just want to see action, and we want to know who that guy is. The strange thing is, I do not know if you have seen the last James Bond film, but James Bond was doing well at being the slow pace, slow burn type film, and then every now and again it kind of falls off from that.
I have never seen any of the what's his name, Daniel Craig. I've never seen any of those James Bonds.
Okay. I would suggest, if you ever were to dive in, I would suggest watching Casino Royale.
Mm-hmm.
To date, probably the best James Bond film, I would argue. And then Skyfall.
I think, isn't that the order they go in anyway?
No, it's Casino Royale, and then I believe...
Quantum of Solace
Quantum
or something.
of Solace, yeah. Then Skyfall. So just read the synopsis of Quantum of Solace. I didn't hate Spectre, but it's not as good. But you do need to know what happens in Spectre to fully understand No Time to Die.
I might check it out because I'm gonna wind up getting the whole James Bond box set here pretty soon.
There you go. That's another thing. Like, we still don't know for sure who's going to be the next James Bond. I do know that Idris Elba was heavily campaigning for it behind the scenes.
Yeah, and people were heavily campaigning for it to be too.
He would be phenomenal. He would be a fantastic Bond. I'm going to be intrigued to see how they handle it, because up until Daniel Craig took the reins, it was pretty much just kind of taken as read that James Bond was the name of 007.
Yeah.
So, it was never explicitly stated in any of the other films that James Bond was actually the birth name of any of the people playing 007. Whereas with Daniel Craig, it is pretty much established that that is his name. So I genuinely don't know what they're going to do.
He's like 100-year-old man.
Yeah, I mean, he is Doctor Who at this point. Like, they're just somehow going to have like a regeneration scene. It's interesting. I feel like given how more gritty these films are, and attempting to give given what the films are, there's always that weird little suspension of disbelief within them. But I feel like what they might do is make it a thing that anyone who now becomes 007 will then also be known as James Bond. That will become the moniker for that agent. So maybe the first film will be whoever is the new Bond getting used to that, because there's no way they're going to change the name. It's not going to be Tony Slattery or whatever to bring back Ben Kingsley, but it'll be interesting. I feel I should ask you at this point, given once again we've diverged a little bit from this film. Is there anything else that you wanted to explicitly touch on when it comes to Safe House?
Oh, when you said comes to Safe House, I was about to say my wife, maybe. I mean, minus the little nitpicky, tiny little things or whatever. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It's one of my favorites. I mean, I haven't watched it in a while, but still, when I watched it, even with the reviewing eye for the show, I mean, I still enjoyed it. It's a solid film. It holds up.
Yeah, that is one thing. It definitely holds up, given the location and everything, and we obviously know when it was made. It's not one of those things where they attempted to have futuristic gadgets, which can instantly date a film. Funnily enough,
because the data chip that he was carrying around, I ain't never seen no shit like that before. So I mean, they can say it's super old, they can say it's super new. So I mean, it is what it is.
So they had some interesting little things in with that. It was kind of fascinating, as we said, it was fascinating to see Ryan Reynolds doing a more serious role. I would argue that he was better in the film Buried when it comes to the sort of serious role. I would say that was a better film for him than Safe House, but that is not a knock on this film at all.
And there's a far more unfortunate ending in that one.
Yes. Definitely a film that you would not necessarily want to watch on a down day. But it was fun. It was fun to watch this film. I definitely enjoyed the pacing of it, as I said. A good amount of action scenes in it that actually flowed well. I think my favorite of the action scenes was when they went into the stadium. I thought that was probably some of the best put together scenes, because it just the sense of where everything is, how everything was going, when things started to go wrong. Like, I thought that was very well put together, and obviously they were watching some good old football. So I'm always fond of that, opposed to that silly hand egg. I mean, come on, how often does the foot hit the ball in American football?
Every time they score.
Well,
Or
including
when
on
they
a touchdown.
returning, and yeah, every time they make a touchdown, you have an attempt. So they foot to ball. When they are giving it to the other team, foot to ball. When they're punting, foot to ball. So quite a few times, just not as much as the proper football.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, because what?
I think we should just call it. I don't think we should call it football. We should just call it NFL. I know it's the name of the league, but we should just call it NFL.
Yeah, I would be all for that if it was just so it's not football anymore, it's NFL, and then we're going to call actual football, because that's what the rest of the world calls it. Yeah, it is so fascinating to me how some of those things go, and I do, I know that some people might come up and say, well, that the English people did call it soccer as well. It's like, I'm well aware. However, we don't call it soccer anymore, so I'm definitely in keeping with following that. But yeah, as I was saying, this film, despite admittedly some of the issues with the editing and the screenplay just being sort of definitely got some great performances in it. Does have some good thrilling moments. And
the ending will make you happy, sad, or sad, happy, or just sad, sad.
Yeah, I mean, depending on which way you fall when it comes to the characters, absolutely, there are many potential ending feelings there. But yeah, I did enjoy the ending. I wasn't 100% sure the way it would go. I had a rough idea, and it pretty much followed that. But I did enjoy, without specifically spoiling it, because I do feel like we've been able to go through this without giving any real spoilers for the film. And I kind of want to keep it that way because I do want people to watch it. The very final thing in the film, I was kind of surprised by, because in these sorts of films, it usually goes a slightly different way and they follow a certain formula, and everyone is ecstatic in the end. And they didn't do that with this one, and I very much enjoyed that. I thought it was a good way to end it, given everything that had happened. So, yeah, no, I do suggest that anyone that has not, as of yet, seen the film Safe House, go and watch the film Safe House. I can tell you it is on Peacock right now. So if you...
same place I watched it. Also, it's just like with some of these streaming services or whatever, I don't know if they got a good copy or not, but like the sound was kind of wonky to me.
It was a little odd at times. I happened to have a friend who had a DVD copy.
Yeah, that's the preferred method if you can watch it, but you get it how you live.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because I asked him, like, hey, do you happen to have that? 'Cause he has an extensive collection of DVDs, and he did. So I borrowed that. I watched it, and then the next day, I saw it was on Peacock. So it was like, well, I could have waited. But then I have heard that there's some weird audio issues. I don't know if it's with the server itself or if it's with the copy they have. But yeah, if you do happen to have a analog copy, even back then, potentially VHS might still have been a thing. If you happen to have a VHS of Safe House, probably preferable to streaming at this time. But yeah, do check it out. I think that's it from my side. Do you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we go?
Watch the movie.
Absolutely, watch it. Watch it as soon as you can. But yes, in that case, once again, thank you very much for coming back on and suggesting yet another film that we can talk about. Always interesting.
Or not.
Or not. Yeah. I guess I should say thank you for suggesting a potential topic of conversation for an episode to sort of string some conversation around. If this is, by any chance, someone's first time listening to you on this podcast, how can people find you in other places?
Word. I host my own podcast called The Random Ramblings with Rob, which you can find on all the social media platforms, to include specifically Twitter at 3R Show and Instagram at The 3R Show. Find the podcast on all podcasting platforms. And I'm also now part of a weekly wrestling talk show called RBR Weekly Wrestling Talk, which is every Wednesday night live at 9 p.m. Central. Yes, 9 p.m. Central and 10 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to hear about professional wrestling or the lack thereof, possibly, come tune in on Wednesday nights.
I will freely admit I know nothing about professional wrestling, but I have been able to drop in on a couple of those, and it's always entertaining. So yes, please do go listen / watch, and do give B-Rob some love there. And obviously, I mentioned at the beginning, but I'll go over it now as well. For BlokeBusters, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, just search BlokeBusters. Send that email to theblokes@blokebusters.com if you so wish to have a long-form discussion via email. But please do reach out. Let us know what you thought of Safe House, what other films you might want me and potentially B-Rob here to talk about or not talk about, as we obviously don't. But yes, and also I am on one episode of the Random Ramblings with Rob podcast. If you want to listen to me avoid answering a question for 2.5 hours, please go listen to that. Yeah, and not even avoiding. It just takes me a long time to get there. Yeah. But always a blast once again to have you on, B-Rob. Thanks once more. And all of you out there, I'll see you next time. Bye.
Yeah.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.